She was only 8 years old, a little girl who dreamed of simple things. A warm meal, a dress without holes, parents who smiled more than they argued. But poverty has a way of crushing dreams, and desperation can turn love into betrayal. One night, everything changed. Her parents made a choice no child should ever have to suffer for. They traded her innocence, her future, her childhood, for money. Not just a little money, not a desperate attempt to put food on the table, but $5 million. Enough to buy silence, enough to bury guilt, enough to sell their own daughter to a billionaire. The blurred silhouette of a man in a luxury suit appears, holding a suitcase of cash. Her parents' hands tremble as they reach for it. In the corner, the little girl clutches her teddy bear, unaware of what's happening. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't fiction. This is the story of a poor little girl whose family sold her for $5 million. And what happened next will shock you. She was born into a life of struggle. A tiny house with broken walls, a leaking roof that dripped with every rain, and a kitchen where empty bowls sat stacked because there was nothing to fill them. Every morning, she walked barefoot to school, her toes pressing into the dust, her dress torn but carefully patched by a mother who had nothing else to give. Children laughed at her shoes mismatched. Too small, yet she wore them with silent pride because they were all she had. At night, she listened to her parents argue. The words were always the same: debt, money, hunger. The girl didn't understand numbers or bills. All she knew was that each fight ended with her mother's tears and her father's silence. She learned to hide her hunger, to smile when she was starving, to pretend she was full so her little brother could eat instead. Even in her pain, she carried kindness. But poverty has a way of testing every family, and soon, the weight of debts and desperation would push her parents to make a decision so unthinkable, it would change her life forever. One evening, a car the family had never seen before rolled up to their doorstep. From it stepped a man, a billionaire, old, powerful, and dressed in a suit that looked more expensive than their entire home. He came with an offer. Not words of kindness, not help for the poor, but a deal. Inside the suitcase he carried was $5 million. Enough to erase every debt, enough to build a new home, enough to make poverty disappear forever. But there was a price no child should ever pay. He wanted their daughter, not for adoption, not for her future, for himself. The room filled with silence. The mother whispered no, the father shook his head, but the money sat there, gleaming, reminding them of every unpaid bill, every hungry night, every cruel landlord pounding at their door. At last, the father's trembling hand pressed down on the papers. A signature became a betrayal, and a little girl's future was sold for $5 million. She didn't understand what was happening. She thought maybe her parents were sending her away to be safe. She thought maybe life would finally get better, but she was wrong. The black car drove her into another world. Towers that touched the sky, chandeliers glowing like fireflies, gardens filled with roses she'd only read about in storybooks. For the first time in her life, she thought maybe this was a dream. Maybe she was being taken to a world where hunger and pain no longer existed. But dreams can be deceiving. Yes, she had silk dresses now. Yes, she had golden toys stacked high in her room. Yes, plates of food arrived daily, piled higher than she had ever seen before. But none of it mattered, because wealth could not buy what she needed most. She was surrounded by riches but starved of love. Every hallway echoed with silence. Every locked door reminded her she wasn't free. Every smile from the billionaire was cold, calculated, never warm, never human. She thought she had escaped poverty, but what she had entered was a prison of gold. And behind those gates, no one could hear her cries. The secret couldn't stay buried forever. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to headlines. And soon, the world knew the truth. A family had sold their daughter for $5 million. The mansion that once stood silent now echoed with the noise of anger. Reporters swarmed the gates. Protesters shouted for justice. Neighbors who once pitted the poor family now turned on them in disgust. And everywhere, one question was asked: How could parents do this to their own child? Her parents became prisoners of their own guilt. No money could quiet the shame that followed them. The billionaire, once untouchable, now faced a storm of accusations. His empire trembled under the weight of scandal. And the little girl, caught in the center of it all, became more than a victim. She became a symbol. Innocence stolen. Innocence betrayed. Innocence sold for greed. But her story was not over. She grew older. The scars of betrayal never left her. The nights she cried herself to sleep, the memories of that suitcase filled with money, the silence of a mansion that felt more like a cage, they haunted her. But instead of breaking her, it built her. She found her voice. She found her strength. And she refused to be silenced any longer. She told her story, not to seek pity, but to shine a light on the darkness others wanted hidden. She became a voice for children who had none, a fighter for those still trapped in prisons of greed and power. What began as betrayal became a movement. She was no longer just the girl who was sold for $5 million. She was proof that the weakest underdog can rise against impossible odds. Her story began with betrayal, but it did not end there. She was sold, silenced, and forgotten. Yet she rose stronger than ever, proof that even in the darkest chapters, there can be hope. And maybe, just maybe, her strength can inspire yours. You're watching InspireTube, where real stories of struggle become stories of strength. If her story moved you, don't just stop here. Click subscribe, join our community, and be part of a movement that turns pain into power and underdogs into champions. Because the next story might just change your life.